Hi everyone, this is Danae and today's video is going to be a Q&A. You submitted all of your questions in my previous video and I'm going to be going through all the comments and answering every question one by one. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first question is, what are your favorite piano concerti, favorite solo piano pieces, favorite composers? So generally I find this a bit of a hard question because it constantly changes. I kind of have a direction which I love. I love German romantic composers, so Brahms, Schumann, things like that really resonate with me. I also really love something very classical like Beethoven, but it is very hard for me to just pick one composer, and I always like to say that my favorite piece is the one that I'm playing right now, and also when I'm on stage and performing a concerto or a solo piano piece, in that moment that's my favorite piece. So it really constantly changes. In a couple of days I'm going to be playing Bach Concerto in D minor. This is a piece that I'm going to be performing for the very first time. It's going to be in the Philharmonie in Paris. So I'm really excited about that. And right now this is the piece I'm totally into and in that headspace. But then the next concert is going to change again. My next concert is going to be Beethoven 5th Piano Concerto, and probably I'm going to be very convinced by that piece then. So really hard to answer. I don't really have one single favorite, and I'm really very influenced by what I'm playing in that moment. By the way, I'm not doing this in any particular order. I'm just answering them as they come up, so they will be completely mixed. So the next question is, how can I find the right height of chair and piano? What should be the distance between chair and piano? So of course, this also really depends on your body build, how tall you are, how long your arms are. But there is one rule of thumb that I learned, which is that when I'm sitting on my piano stool and I put my arms out like this, my fists should be able to touch the wood on the piano. So this part right here, that is the right distance. And for the height, I learned that it should be ideally that when I'm sitting and my arm is going down and my elbow, that this is in a 90-degree angle, basically like this, to explain it. This is the arm, and then this is the underarm, this is the elbow, and it's a 90-degree angle. Of course, this is just a very general rule, but I would say that if you feel like your shoulders can be relaxed and your elbows can be relaxed in this 90-degree angle with a little bit of space to play with, then you're probably correct. Okay, so the next question is from somebody who has a granddaughter who is showing interest in music. And the question is, at what level and how often was I studying at ages 4, 5, 6, etc. and through my teens? When did I realize that I was at an advanced level? When I was 4 and 5, I wasn't playing at all. I only started when I was 6. And when I started that very first year, it really wasn't that serious at all. I was just practicing maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes every day. But then I would say that when I was 7, things definitely changed. I had entered into my first competition, which I won. That of course was a big motivating factor. And also my parents always had instilled this mentality in me: if you do something, do it properly. And I had really asked for playing the piano. They had not suggested it to me. This was my idea because I had seen a girl at a birthday party that was playing piano and also wanted to do it. And they said, okay, if we actually now buy a piano in this house, you need to be doing this properly. So I did, and I started practicing regularly. And when I was 7, 8, I would say, I mean, at the age of 7, I would say I was practicing definitely 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, maybe every day. And when I was 8, I feel like I was already practicing 3, 4 hours. 9, 10, those were my definitely 3, 4 hours a day practice times. And then when I was a teenager, maybe 5 hours for 5 hours. And then when I was 15, 16, 17, 5, 6 hours. This was really my most intense practice time. When I was 16, I moved out for half a year and I did like an exchange, student exchange in a way program, or like a year abroad basically. And I was living alone for 6 months and I was practicing a lot during that time. When I was 16, at least 6 hours every day. Maybe even more. That was the crazy time in my life where I was also sometimes practicing through the night. And then when I came back home at the age of 17, 18, I was definitely practicing a lot. Actually, I only started practicing less once I started having kids. So yeah, I think that it was a gradual increase in practice well into my studies. And of course, now I don't practice 6 or 7 hours every day. That's completely impossible for me, but I definitely have that foundation. When did I realize that I was at such an advanced level? That's an interesting question. I never really thought about that. When I was with my first teacher in the music school, in a way, I would say that I was, quote unquote, the best of the music school. But of course, that's not, very hard. It was just a normal music school in the city that I was living in. So I thought that I was kind of at a good level, but, I didn't really think that I was a great pianist. And I remember the first time that I played for a professor who has, people that actually want to become professional pianists as students, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't expect for those professors to say to me, "You're great." I really didn't know what to expect. And when they said to me, "Oh, you're actually very talented, you're actually very good," I was positively surprised. I thought, "Oh, okay, cool." I really didn't have, any expectations, not low, not high. I was just neutral about it. But I think when I started studying with my second teacher, who was a very famous piano professor, Karl-Heinz Kämmerling, that's of course when I got very aware of level. And in the beginning, actually, I thought, oh my God, there are so many great people in this piano class. I need to get on that level. And of course, I also realized that I was advanced, but I always felt like, okay, I really need to step up and be part of this class. And of course, being in this class for so many years, for 10 years, really changed me. And that's, of course, when I started growing older and realized that I'm actually good also within the class. Of course, that's when I realized that I'm at an advanced level. Generally, I think what does play a role is what I mentioned before about the mentality that my parents instilled in me. This, when you do something, do it properly. Because I always wanted to be good at whatever I was doing, no matter what it was. If it was piano or ballet or anything else, I never wanted to just, not put my best foot forward or not put in any effort. I always tried to be good at what I was doing. And I think that really plays an important role. It wasn't about, oh, which level am I on for me? It was just about, I want to do my personal best. And I think in a way, this is also good advice for young players or young people getting into it. Just do your personal best. Put in your extra effort, try to go that extra mile, whatever that means to you personally. And if you're doing something like getting into piano or learning another instrument, I would suggest that, this is a process that takes a lot of time. It's a long process. You will never just sit at the piano as a 5-year-old and be able to play. So it takes a long time to master it. But I would suggest that the most important thing is to just stay with it, just stay, don't stop, do it properly, as my parents said. Just practice your half hour or 1 hour, whatever it is, every day, and you're going to see improvement. If you do something regularly and always put in effort, you are going to see improvement. And that's what is so rewarding. That's what's going to give you so much joy and pride, as it should. And that's what it is all about. And little shout out to Emily Taylor, which is the little girl that is showing interest and might be starting to play the piano soon. The next question is how you can improve the accompaniment in contrast with the melody. I'm not sure that I understand this question correctly. I assume that you're talking about some type of accompaniment figure in the left hand usually, and then the melody in the right hand. So how to work on an accompaniment, I think there are many different exercises. I actually have made an entire video on how to improve left hand accompaniment patterns. So maybe check that out if you haven't already. One big tip that I would mention is when you've practiced the accompaniment, when you've improved it with all the exercises that go with that, dividing it up into sections, practicing the hard bits and all the things that I usually do when I have technically hard passages, then play the accompaniment and play the melody in the right hand, or if it's vice versa, melody in the left hand, silently. So do the motions and press the keys, but silently. In that way, you can listen to what the accompaniment does while the right hand is pretending to move, because very often there are mistakes that creep in, and there are certain strange tempo changes or rubato or anything like that that we do once we add the melody, because we feel that music and we get swept away by it. So try to add it in silently in order to have this check and control what exactly the left hand is doing when you add in the melody, and then you can adjust and improve and correct it, and then once you actually add in the melody, it's going to be much better. The next question is whether I have a favorite tonality and whether I see colors with different tonalities and different notes. So I personally do not see colors. I know that there are many people out there that do associate a note or a tonality with color. I don't have this thing where I visually literally see a color. Of course, I associate emotions with certain tonalities, and in my mind I might find certain colors more fitting, but I don't actually visually see a color. To me, for example, B flat minor is an incredibly dark tonality. I feel like this is one where things are dark. I see like a dark blue, almost black in my mind when I think about this. And in contrast to that, if I think about, for example, A major for me is a very bright, shining, proud, like golden, full of rays of sun type of tonality. So these are just two examples of how I see tonalities, but I don't actually visually see a color when I listen to the sound. Are there pieces that I find are very rarely played or are underplayed because they're unknown? Well, as a pianist, I would like to say there are tons of pieces like that. The repertoire really is never ending as a pianist, which on the one hand is a blessing because we can never stop discovering new exciting things to play, and that's amazing. On the other hand, it's also a little bit of a curse, I find, because when you are a professional pianist, you will never reach that point where you can say, I kind of have all the core repertoire that I need to be able to play in my fingers. That's basically impossible as a pianist. Whereas if you're, for example, a cellist, you can basically have all the cello concertos that are, I don't know, maybe 15 if you really count all of them, and then you really have all the core stuff. But as a pianist, that's not possible. So there are many pieces that are underplayed. I mean, there are, for example, Poulenc concertos for solo piano. Everyone knows the Poulenc concerto for two pianos, not the one for solo piano. There are so many composers that we barely know that are amazing and that have written great things. I have recently been getting more into the Greek composers, so I've been rediscovering things like Kalomiris, also classical pieces by Theodorakis. Theodorakis, of course, is very known, but not all of his classical pieces are that known. So I have really been getting into that, and I'm finding it very, very interesting. But also composers from other periods. For example, just a couple of days ago, I played Mendelssohn's Second Piano Concerto. Now, again, this is not a completely unknown piece, but it is very seldomly played compared to the first one. I don't really know why. I personally love it. I even recorded it on CD, but this is also a concerto where I think it should be played much more often because I think it's so beautiful and such a touching composition. As a pianist, there is no end to discovering new pieces. The next question is, what techniques would you suggest in order to improve passages where you have to play a series of pairs of fast repeated octaves? For example, Liszt Sonata in B minor. I've made several videos on how to practice octaves, so it would be way too long to get into it in detail now in this Q&A. I can link those videos down below so you can check them out. Number one rule to me when you have fast repeated octaves is to concentrate on the inner voice, on the thumb. If you have them in both hands or in one hand, doesn't matter. And then the upper voice, the fifth or fourth finger, simply follows. So this is very, very important, I find, and very helpful. And then also, if you have repetitions, to kind of move on the key. Don't be just on one point of the key, but maybe move up a little bit, move down a little bit in order to create some type of motion while you repeat them, because that's what's going to make the repetition feel more natural. If you have a little bit of a movement as if you were moving on the keys, but instead you're just moving on one key. But again, I will link some videos down below where I'm discussing octaves. I have one video where I'm discussing specifically octave repetitions from a point in Liszt's Rigoletto, and then also octaves just going up and down. So definitely check that out. I think it's probably going to be helpful for you. The next question is pretty interesting. Which 3 to 4 Chopin etudes would I classify as the easiest to master? I would probably say that the easiest ones are Opus 25 number 1 and 2. I think those are the easiest ones to master. Those are the ones that you can get to the final tempo the quickest. Next, maybe I would say Opus 10 number 9, Opus 10 number 5. Number 9 is in the left hand, so if you have a weak left hand, it's going to be hard. But to train it, it's a pretty good one. And I think Opus 10 number 5 is also fairly simple. Now, when I say simple, it's of course still a difficult Chopin etude, but compared to the other ones, I think it's easier to master. Although I would still suggest, like I've mentioned in my Chopin etudes videos previously, that while you practice those, let's say, quote unquote, easier ones and get to a place where you can play them through faster, I would suggest that you look into Opus 10 number 1 and Opus 10 number 2 at the same time. Not with the goal of being able to play through within a month or two, definitely not, but just in order to build them up slowly. This is how I learned those 2 etudes, and I found it incredibly valuable. My teacher did this with every single one of his students. This really was a precondition, if you studied with him, that you had to practice Opus 10 number 1 and 2 with these specific exercises. I have videos on that. I can link them in the description box as well, where you just really do a little bit every day in your tempo. It's not hard, it's incredibly slow when you start, so you can definitely do it, and it's in a very long and slow process. But this is exactly why I would suggest that you start that process early on, so that when 1 or 2 years have gone by, you will be at a place where you can play through those etudes comfortably. And once you reach that level, it feels so good to have this ability in your fingers to be able to play through these pieces, because they have some core technical difficulties that you will meet in so many different repertoire pieces. The next question is about me. At what age did you decide to become a professional pianist? Have you thought about making other choices? Is the job of being a pianist as you imagined it? So at what age did I want to become a professional pianist? I'm not really sure. There was not really one age where I decided, okay, I'm 100% sure now that I want to be a professional pianist. Already pretty early on, it was obvious that I was going to do this very intensely. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I was already practicing 3-4 hours a day. I was going into competitions, so it was obviously something that I was doing very seriously. And then at the same time, I was also doing ballet quite seriously, actually. And there came a point where I had to decide between piano and ballet. But when that point came, it was kind of the obvious choice for me that I would go with piano. So I would say that by the age of 14, 15, it was clear that this was my path. I was also doing school, and I finished school and all of that, and my parents always made a point of telling me, you know, you can't study anything else, you have good grades in school, so it's no problem for you. You could also go into a different direction in life. And I knew that, but I never really realistically considered it. It was kind of obvious to me that I was always going to study music and go into that direction of piano. Now, if I had studied something else, that's such a difficult thing for me to answer, because I think my first choice would have been ballet. Then I would have just gotten into ballet, or I already was in ballet. I was dancing at the opera. I was dancing semi-professionally, basically, and I would have just trained much more and really gotten into that, I think. And if I also would not have done that, basically nothing artistic, then that's a really hard question. I don't really know what I would have studied. I can imagine that I would have gone into the direction of languages, maybe something with English or French, which I also loved a lot, and maybe gone into that direction. Maybe also philosophy, something that I loved a lot, but I don't really know what I would have done job-wise with that. I think I probably would have discovered that along the studies. And is the job of a pianist as I imagined it? That's a very interesting question. I think that you can never be prepared for what this job actually is like. As a little kid, of course, I always imagined practicing playing concerts. That's a big part of it. But of course, it's not the whole job. There's so much more to it. There's the whole administrative side, which I had no clue about. So this is definitely something that I learned later on. Then, of course, there is also the pressure and the stress. This is something that I think you also learn slowly, and you also learn how to deal with it, how to deal with short notice preparations, how to deal with the pressure of having to perform on a big stage every couple of days. So this is something that you really learn step by step. As for the joy of it and the reward of being on stage and sharing your passion with the audience, this really is how I imagined it. That part, which is the part why I actually am doing it and why I wanted to do it when I was young, that is how I imagined it, and actually also so much more. So generally, I can really say that I really love my job. I really love what I'm doing. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, and I'm so grateful that I can live off of doing my passion and following my passion. So in a way, it is exactly how I always wanted it to be, and that's really beautiful. The next question is, how do I clean my piano without damaging it but still keeping it clean? And actually, I have a cloth that you usually use for babies. I don't know the name exactly, but it's this white cloth that you use when you're breastfeeding, or that you use when you want to burp them on your shoulder, that you can swaddle them in, this type of a cloth. And I actually always had that to clean the piano, also before I had kids, because it's just the perfect consistency, and this is what I use. And then sometimes I actually use like a special thing that is made for wood for the piano, just to put it on the cloth, and then I wipe over it. But that's really all I do. I make sure that I don't leave it open at night so that there is no dust going into it, because that's very damaging. I make sure to close it. I make sure to not put any glass or food on it. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. But then again, I've been at so many pianists' homes, and I see how they just put a glass or a cup on their piano, and I just cannot handle it. I find that so strange. So of course, nothing touches the piano that is not a score, or my iPad, which is my score, or the cloth. So I don't put anything else on the piano. And then, yeah, as I said, I just keep it closed. I go over it with the cloth and this special solution for wood, and that's basically it. The next question is one about the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, and it is about the octave trills in the third movement. It says, the second one is brutal unless you cheat and remove your thumb from the key. Is there another way? Well, actually, you've already figured it out. The way to make it easier is to literally remove the thumb from the key, which is absolutely fine. You can just use the pedal and no one's really going to notice. I think in the end, this just depends on your hand size. If you have quite big hands like I do, then it's actually fine. However, I totally understand the feeling where it can tense up. And I would say the priority here, because the whole movement is so virtuoso, the priority is for you to not have strange tension or pain in your hand. So if you need to just lift the thumb, it's no problem at all, and just have the trill comfortably and then go to the next octave. The pedal is going to save you here. The second question is about Beethoven's Tempest Sonata. Someone is practicing a lot of Beethoven sonatas, and it's about the arpeggios at the end of the first movement. Now, I hope I'm getting the place correctly, and it's the one that you mean. I'm assuming that you mean the final bars where the left hand is playing the D minor arpeggios. So my fingering is starting from the D. D, A, F, I play with 1, 4, 5. Then F, D, A, I play with 1, 3, 5. And then A, F with 1, 2. And then it goes again from the start. So 1, 4, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 2. I know that these are not your usual arpeggio fingerings. However, I find them helpful because I'm not thinking of this figure as 2 arpeggios, but I'm thinking of the chord. And if you were to play a D minor chord starting with the A, so A, D, F, A, you would play 5, 3, 2, 1. And this is the fingering that I'm playing. And then the lower chord, starting from the F, F, A, D, you would also play 5-4. So this is why it's 1-4-5, 1-3-5, 1-2. The final Beethoven Sonata question is Waldstein, and talking about that moment where you're trilling and then the fifth finger has the melody in the third movement. I would, again, just like with the Moonlight Sonata, strongly suggest that you use the pedal in order to make things easier for you. Again, if you have a huge hand and you don't mind it and it doesn't hurt, of course, keep the fifth finger and, you know, play it exactly as it is written. But I think it is totally fine to lift the fifth finger, use the pedal, and the effect is going to be very beautiful still. So make sure that you're not hurting, that it's comfortable for you, and try to create legato and the illusion of a melody played with a comfortable fingering with your imagination. That really is so much more powerful than we realize sometimes. If you just imagine a phrase or imagine a legato line, you might really make it sound like it, even though you're playing fifth finger, fifth finger, fifth finger, and you're lifting it. So try to use your imagination, feel the phrase, and then use the pedal as a help, and I think it's going to work out like that. Then some of you have been asking me about concerts in the USA. I was supposed to have 2 US tours this year, but unfortunately got canceled due to the current situation. However, most likely I will be coming next year in November. So it's still almost a year to go, but I think that this is now the plan, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it will actually work out and I will be able to come. And I will be playing at the Gilmore Festival. I will be playing my debut there, my Gilmore debut, and a couple of other concerts as well. Of course, I will be keeping you up to date as to when exactly it's going to be and where I'm going to be, because I know that many of my viewers are in the US, so I will definitely keep you posted. And then the final question is if I have any practice tips for Bach. It says specifically his inventions and continuous 16th notes. Any tips to get them smooth, but with a non-legato sound and without tension? And I can tell you that question really hit home for me because I am practicing Bach so intensely right now. Because as I said, I have this Bach Concerto coming up, and this really is a hard thing to get Bach's 16th notes just as they should be. I would suggest that you don't think of them as completely non-legato, because this is a mistake that I make quite often, and then they sound super chopped and separate. So I try to, on the one hand, have that non-legato bouncy feeling, and I try to think of them as a dance. But then on the other hand, I try to actually connect them with my fingers physically. And the combination of these two, in my opinion, creates the right amount of legato, non-legato that Bach needs. Now, I think it is important to remember that these pieces are very often written for cembalo, so articulation plays a huge role. And there are many different rules that you can follow that are very interesting and helpful when you're playing Bach. For example, one rule is that if the notes follow each other, so basically a scale, they're supposed to be legato. If it is a third or a fourth, then they're supposed to be non-legato. So these rules are very interesting. Also musically, if it goes up, it's like a mini crescendo. If it goes down, it's like a mini diminuendo. I have played on the cembalo a little bit, not professionally or in concert, just out of interest and in my studies. And this was very helpful for me in playing Bach on the modern piano as well. So when you're thinking of how to do the articulation, keep it in mind that it is very often a dance that you're playing. Of course, inventions are not dances, but very often Bach wrote Baroque dances, and his pieces are actually very light and have this dance spirit. And think of that, and then also think about making it interesting by using articulation. So for example, 1 note staccato, 3 legato, or 1 note staccato, 2 legato, the 4th one staccato again. So you can do a lot by creating these interesting articulation patterns. And if you're just looking for the general legato feeling, as I said, I think it's this mix between legato, non-legato, where you do connect them physically on the keyboard, but still you're thinking light. I really hope that you enjoyed this Q&A and that you found it interesting. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I think this is a pretty long video, but I hope that I got through each and every one of them now. And I will see you again in my next video next week. Bye!